Good evening from Tel Aviv. Violence continued today in Egypt as the Muslim Brotherhood continued to demonstrate violently against the newly formed government. It's not clear how these demonstrations end. The Muslim Brotherhood has refused to accept any sort of compromise towards any new elections that have been planned. The new government has announced a plan for new elections in 6 months. Prior to those elections, there will be a new constitution that will be passed by a group of experts. 6 months is a very short time to do both the Constitution and elections, but it's something that's doable. And obviously the new government in Egypt is under a lot of pressure to prove that it was not a military coup, but just another blip on the way towards some sort of a democratic Egypt. That pressure is particularly strong coming from the United States, where some very strange statements have been made by congressional leaders who I thought knew better. Both Senator McCain, Senator Levin, and a number of other leading senators have called for a cutoff of aid to Egypt because of what took place there. It seems they're fighting the last war or learning the lessons from the last time when the United States supported right-wing dictatorships against left-wing potential governments that may have been leaning towards the communist bloc. So this time we learned the lesson, and we should support the Muslim Brotherhood over the rest of the Egyptian people. I have to say, a very strange position for some of these politicians to be taking. In the meantime, all this discussion has been about $1.5 billion in aid that the United States gives Egypt. This year's aid has already been given, so we're talking about aid for next year. Luckily for Egypt, both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have stepped up. Saudi Arabia offering $5 billion in immediate aid, and the United Arab Emirates offering $2 billion in aid. That aid is desperately needed by the country in order to pay for imports, in order to get itself through the next few months. Those two countries have stepped up and given them that aid. What will happen the next few days is still unclear. What I can say is the United States is in the unenviable position, and President Obama, of being hated by both sides. The liberals claim that he's helping the Muslim Brotherhood and don't understand how he can abandon the liberal groups in Egypt, while the Muslim Brotherhood is convinced that it's a secret plot by the United States and President Obama to overthrow them. Middle East conspiracies always continue and always have a way of maintaining themselves. This time we have a whole new set of conspiracies. While this is going on in Egypt, events in the north continue. In Beirut today, a car bomb went off in the Hezbollah-controlled section of Beirut. A number of people were killed and scores were wounded. It's another example of the sectarian violence, Sunni versus Shiite, that has overtaken Syria, spreading off into Lebanon. In Syria, of course, while all this has been going on in Egypt, 100 people a day have been killed each and every day in the Syrian civil war. Again, most of them by the government killing its own people. There have been additional reports on the mysterious explosion that took place in North Syria, in Latakia, over the weekend. That explosion supposedly took place from a number of missile attacks, and supposedly what blew up was a warehouse holding ground-to-sea missiles, missiles that could have endangered the Israeli Navy off the coast of Syria, off the coast of Lebanon. That warehouse was totally destroyed. No one is taking credit, and no one is accusing anybody. Better everybody stay silent, although newspapers, of course, are doing all sorts of speculation. Two last stories coming out of Israel. Number one, Daphne Liff, the leader of the protest movement, has announced that they were resuming protests starting this Saturday night. They are protesting the continued increase in prices. What they're really protesting is the fact that absolutely nothing, and I can say in totality, nothing has taken place to meet any of their demands. Prices have continued to rise, housing prices have risen, and there hasn't been one thing that has taken place that will affect any of those two factors. Nothing the government has done will do anything except increase prices. When they increased VAT by 1%, all they did was increase prices across the board in many different areas. So Saturday night, we'll see what the turnout is in the first set of demonstrations. We'll be there to report from the demonstrations on Saturday night. Finally, the news from the high-tech world today in Israel. The Israeli company Mobileye, a Jerusalem-based company that develops assisted driving products. These are products that assist drivers to avoid all sorts of hazards, and is also actually working in the same way Google is in a driverless car. Received a major investment today. Received an investment of $400 million from private equity investors in the United States. The $400 million investment was to purchase 25% of the company, thus giving this private company a value of $1.6 billion. That's it from Tel Aviv. Good evening. This is Mark Schulman.